What's up, everybody? 7-0, 3-0 in the SEC. Ole Miss is rolling, and they are rolling into Baton Rouge for perhaps the toughest game they have had all season long. And before we go too far, Nick, I just want to throw this beauty up on the screen as we get started. Look at that. It just looks marvelous.
Beautiful.
Ole Miss at the top of the list in the SEC West, the only undefeated team remaining in the SEC West. 3-0 in the conference, 7-0 overall. Alabama being upset by Tennessee over the weekend. Hell for the calls there. Nick, huge game this weekend. I don't think anybody would debate that this is the biggest game Ole Miss has had all year, without question.
Oh, yeah, without question, especially going on the road to Tiger Stadium, Death Valley. Yeah, it's gonna be a beast. You know, you got a bunch of players that have – I don't believe anyone on this team has ever played in Tiger Stadium. And if they did, it wasn't for Ole Miss. So, yeah, it's going to be a beast, but I'm excited. You know, this is the time of the year where that schedule is going to start getting tough, and we're really going to find out what the Rebels are made of.
Yeah, and Death Valley, the old saying at LSU is Death Valley is where dreams go to die, and football seasons go to die. And Ole Miss has their best start since 1962. The last time they were 7-0. You may have corrected me on that last time. I've seen multiple different media outlets report multiple different years. It's really hard to get an accurate because some people don't recognize one year. Some people, it's right. Either way, it's been a long time.
Yeah, bottom line, a long time.
Yeah. And they've only been 8-0, if I'm not mistaken, the one time ever they finished a 10-0 season. And, of course, that was a lot different back then. There were only 10 games in the season.
Right.
They didn't have the same system. You were basically the writers voted who the national champion was. You know, that's how it was for a long time. So times have changed significantly. Absolutely. With what 8-0 means now to what it did back then. 8-0 right now means you literally have your destiny and the SEC West in total control.
Right.
Leading into a game against Texas A&M, followed by a bye week, followed by perhaps the biggest game in our history against Alabama. We're not going to get too far ahead. We don't want to put the cart too much before the horse.
Right.
A lot going up. There's a lot on the line this weekend. This Absolutely. Is probably one of the biggest games against LSU Ole Miss has had. I mean, last year was a big game because Arch Manning was in town and they retired Eli's number.
Right.
But that was kind of why it was a big game last year.
Right.
Not so much for the ramifications of the game.
Yeah, exactly.
This year, the ramifications of the game are huge.
Yeah. And you're right. You know, I can't remember the last time there was a really big game, probably back in 2014 against LSU, 2014. So, yeah, and like I said earlier, I'm just excited to watch them play and just, see what they're really made of because LSU has their guy at quarterback, Jaden Daniels, and if you let him beat you, kind of like last week against Ashford, he's a running quarterback, and if you let him beat you with his legs, he's going to. You want him to beat you with his arm, so.
Well, he happens to be their leading rusher as well as their quarterback. Yep. So, Jaden Daniels is not to be messed around with. Of course, the transfer from Arizona State. Auburn exposed Ole Miss a little bit last week in the run defense. We were so confident in Ole Miss's defense. They've looked so good all year. And then last week they play Auburn. They jump out to a 21-0 lead. And then what happens? They ease off the gas. They start to sleepwalk. They go into one of those offensive lulls that we've gotten so used to. And Auburn, like we said, doesn't matter that they're having a bad year. They are an SEC team. They are an SEC West team. They are desperate because of how their season is going. Their coach is trying to keep his job. This is not a team that's going to go quietly if you let them in the game. And Ole Miss let them hang around. They got scary there for a little while. But in the end, Ole Miss was able to pull it out. But 331 yards, I believe, they gave up on the ground to Auburn last week, which is not a good thing, especially when you're coming into LSU.
Yeah, absolutely. And, like you said, that it was really just the big plays that the defense gave up on the ground. You have a guy slip a tackle within 5 yards of line of scrimmage and then maybe another one down the field and he breaks a big run. And I think that's one thing, stopping those big runs against Jaden Daniels is what you're going to have to ultimately do, I think, to win the game. Because if you let him run around and then him and Kayshon Boutte have started really hitting it off these past two games. Boutte has half of his receptions in the last two games this season. I think
it took him a while to get going.
Yeah.
He was this very heralded player for LSU coming into the season.
Yeah.
It was not a good look. There was even talk that he was unhappy in the program and all that
Right.
kind of stuff. And all of a sudden, here he comes.
Yeah, and and a lot of people have him pegged as a first-round draft pick, and I believe it because I've seen him play. And I don't know if you remember last time he played Ole Miss, he went for over 300 yards, set the single game receiving record for LSU, and had 3 touchdowns in that shootout in Baton Rouge in the COVID 2020 season. So he's definitely a threat, and he's not the only guy that as a receiver that LSU have that's a threat.
Yeah.
Almost all of them are threats, and then you just can't get too focused on the pass game because they're not an overwhelming running game, but they're gonna do their part in the running department to pick up the slack if there's any.
And actually, Keyshawn's he's only got 1 touchdown pass.
Yeah, 1 touchdown
this year. Their leading receiver this year is actually Malik Neighbors, 418 yards. He's only got 1 touchdown. Their leading touchdown catcher is DeRay Jenkins. He's got 4. They have a bunch of different receivers in this group. They've got Neighbors with 418 yards, Brian Thomas Jr. with 254 and 3 touchdowns. Of course, you mentioned Keyshawn with 245 and a touchdown, Jenkins with 237 and 4 touchdowns. You throw in 100+ for Taylor, Lacey, and Hilton. This is a pretty well-rounded receiving group, particularly with a quarterback who is dual threat, doesn't mind running, was a transfer, wasn't a part of this system last year, first-year head coach. And now 2020, Ole Miss had a horrific defense. I mean, they gave yards to everybody. So, but to your point, though, it's still valid because last week raised some defensive concerns for Ole Miss, mostly in the run game, but LSU is a very high-profile receiving team. You can't let these guys get behind you. They're going to have to play tight, and LSU is going to be out here in Death Valley. They're a 2.5-point favorite all of a sudden. This is the first game Ole Miss has not been favored to win so far this year, and it's a whole new ball game, no pun intended. But Ole Miss is about to face a whole different atmosphere and scenario than they faced all season long.
Yeah, I think you mentioned earlier, we played Auburn last week, and they were kind of desperate, and I feel like that's how LSU was at the beginning of the year, but they got their feet underneath them now, and they're kind of starting to look like the LSU that we all know. They're going to play you hard all 4 quarters. And if you're in Death Valley, you better bring your best or they're just going to probably run you over if you give them the shot. So, and my 4 keys for the game will be out later on this week, but I think we got to get on them early. If you get them early, like we did last week, we jump out to 21-0 on Auburn. And, you have players included, kind of sitting in the passenger seat, reclining their seat back, kind of taking a chill pill. Well, all it's going to take is for LSU to break a big play or two, and their fans are going to be back in it. Mm-hmm. And like we've talked about before, the crowd plays a big factor. If you have players that are down, but if you hit a big play or two, get that confidence, and you got fans behind you, especially in Death Valley, you could have an LSU team that not going to quit. What I'm getting at, so you got to jump on them early and try and defeat them early. Get their confidence down.
LSU is hostile. I mean, there's no other word. You go into LSU, you better be prepared for the worst environment you are going to face, maybe outside of Knoxville, in the SEC. That's just a different breed up there. We're not going to get into that. We don't play them this year. Maybe outside of Atlanta, but LSU, these guys, they're vicious. They are brutal. This is a fan base that is known for being the opposite of nice. They are not afraid to use language that we certainly can't use on this show. They're not afraid to show fingers we can't show on this show. They are not afraid to, that Tim Tebow, I remember that incident so clearly. The nicest guy probably in the history of college football, and they let him have it. I mean, throwing beer at him, cussing at him, flipping him off. This is not an environment that is going to be pleasant. And for a lot of this Ole Miss team, they've never seen an environment like this. They've never played in an environment like this. The quarterback has never seen. And Jackson Dart, he's never seen an LSU. Coming out of USC in the Pac-12, which he didn't even play that much, but the Pac-12 doesn't have an atmosphere like this.
Oh, yeah.
They've got some good atmospheres from time to time, mostly in big rivalry games, but nothing like LSU. Quinshon Judkins, he hasn't seen an LSU. These guys, Zach Evans coming from the Big 12, he hasn't. this is a new thing for almost this entire team. And this is also the stingiest defense that Ole Miss has faced. You know, they've been racking up the run yards, but LSU has only allowed just over 1,000 rushing yards in 7 games. That's a pretty good rushing defense. Ole Miss has been relying on that run game heavily, particularly with Jackson Dart still trying to quit making some of those mistakes. I'm curious if that was one of your keys to the game, because LSU's run defense is stingy.
Yeah, I think I don't know if I included it in my 4 keys, but I did last week for Auburn. You know, I think one thing that has really helped Dart this year is that he's been protected tremendously.
Yeah.
He's only been sacked twice. And I think to have him not having that, you know, voice in the back of his head saying, oh, here they come, get rid of it. You know, I think that's definitely helped him a lot. And I think, you know, like you said, he's never played in an atmosphere like this. So I think if we can, you know, get on him early and not have that, because without a doubt, it's one of my keys to the game is not letting that crowd get into it.
Yeah.
Don't let them get into it. You do. And like you said, teams and records go to die at LSU.
Yeah.
And if you let them, the crowd will beat you themselves if you let them.
Yeah.
So it's just a different beast. And I'm just, you know, it's so hard to, like you said earlier, you know, the LSU's favored. But if you looked earlier this week, Ole Miss was favored. I think it was 1.5, 2 points. But I think every time I've looked, LSU's kind of gotten a point here, a point there.
Yeah.
So, you know, I
Money's
think
coming in heavy on LSU for sure.
Yeah. And so it's just when it gets dark in Death Valley in October, it's around Halloween time, you better buckle up because it's going to get nasty. And I hate to make it so much more about the game here, but it's part of the game. The crowd's part of the game, and it can become demoralizing.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen that now. The 2 atmospheres that Ole Miss has had this year, Kentucky and Auburn, that were off the charts, played a huge role in the game. Lane Kiffin talks about the crowd all the time. Well, guess what? You know, Brian Kelly doesn't have to ask the LSU crowd to get involved.
No.
They are going to be involved the entire game. They will this team back in the game. And like you've mentioned several times, if they get a little bit of momentum back, you are in the danger zone. You do not want that team to get the momentum on their side, because it is very difficult to get it back once that stadium has momentum and that team has the momentum. Now, comparing the two, Jaden Daniels, we were talking about as far as the passing game is concerned, he's thrown for 1,564 yards, 10 touchdowns to only 1 interception. Jackson Dart, a little bit behind him in the yardage, 1,488, 11 touchdowns, but 6 interceptions. We've talked about this leading up to every game recently, but I don't think it's been more important than this week now. The interceptions. Now, last week's interception, it was a toss-up on, yes, Dart threw the ball too hard. No question. You can't rocket a pass in there when the dude's 5 feet in front of you and there's 4 defenders trying to collapse on him. Right. Yes, also Mingo should have caught that football.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a 50-50 one.
Yeah.
The debate was raging on social media.
There's both sides.
I don't care about all that. Okay. The interception happened. Ole Miss won the game. That's over.
Right.
LSU will make you pay without a doubt. You cannot make those mistakes in Death Valley, especially if the game's going to be close. And I fully expect it to be close. Absolutely. I do not expect this to be a blowout. One way or the other. I certainly don't see Ole Miss going in there and blowing LSU out on the road. And they're going to be in this game the whole time, regardless of who's winning. And you make that mistake, if Ole Miss wins the toss, they're going to receive the opening kick. We see it.
Absolutely.
So if Ole Miss wins the toss, go ahead and prepare. LSU's getting the second half kickoff. Well, guess what? You make that mistake at the end of the first half, like has been the case over and over again. And then LSU's got momentum at the end of the half, and then they get the ball back to start the second half. We saw what happened against Auburn. All of a sudden, they had momentum, made that game really close there for a little while. LSU's a different breed. They are a lot better football team than Auburn. And, no, I'm not trying to disrespect Auburn, but they're just on a different level this year than LSU is. LSU's going to make Ole Miss pay. You make that mistake, if you make that stupid interception, you're jumping around in the pocket for no reason when there's nobody on you, and you overthrow a receiver when you could have had a touchdown like we saw. You can't do stuff like that in this environment. So I'm hoping that maybe this week, this is kind of the week we see Jackson mature out of that. But boy, is it going to be a hard environment to do it in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right. We've kind of seen Dart make that next step every week. I feel like, he's maybe making a throw he wouldn't have made a week ago. Or not made a week ago. So, yeah, and I think I'm not sure. I was just trying to find a flaw to this LSU team. And upon looking at the record and, all that and stats, one thing I found was if both losses have come when their opponent has run over 70 plays. And Ole Miss averages almost, I think it's 76, 77 plays a game. And that's with some games, where they milk the clock at the end of the game and could have potentially run 90, could be averaging 90 plays a game. So I think if we can, move the ball effectively, get that snap count up, and have their defense on the field a while and be able to get our defense off the field on third down, I think that things will go in our favor if we can, keep the ball, sustain good drives. And, everyone loves a one-play 76-yard touchdown. That's great. Points are great. But if we can get some of these 12, 13-play 5-minute drives, 4-minute drives, that could prove to be the outlier, I believe.
Yeah, Ole Miss is averaging right at 73 plays a game. Like you said, they've run 514 plays overall, which is good enough for an average of about 73 a game. LSU, meanwhile, I'm trying to find it right now, what their plays are. Total plays, they've run 508. So a little less than 70 a game, but they're really close.
They're right around there, yeah.
So now, again, the benefit to Ole Miss and the advantage they have is in the running attack. They have 3 different runners that had 100 yards last week. You had Judkins, Evans, and Dart. Judkins, of course, has 720 yards overall. He's got 10 rushing touchdowns. That's first in the conference. Zach Evans has 605 yards. Of course, Dart has 371. I haven't heard an update on Bentley yet when he's going to be back. Hopefully we'll see more of him, but I'm not 100% sure, so I'm not going to speculate because I haven't been able to talk to Lane or ask Lane about that, and Lane wouldn't answer me anyway. He doesn't talk about injuries. And LSU, their leading rusher is their quarterback with 521 yards. After that, they don't have anybody else with over 235 yards. Josh Williams has 234. That's their next highest rusher. So Ole Miss has the advantage in the rushing attack, but you have to play defense. And
Absolutely.
What you were talking about there a minute ago, yes, those 75-yard, one-play drives are great. But guess what? Then your defense is right back on the field. So at some point, LSU might be like, as long as we're scoring, hey, we're fine with them getting that one play because their defense is right back out there. So there's a balance to that you have to try to find. So we'll see what happens. Ole Miss has the advantage in the running game. And if you can balance it out, and then you have to protect your quarterback. If you don't protect your quarterback at LSU, it's going to cause problems. Jackson, please slide. Just start sliding, man. We got to see you slide more. Yeah. But other than that, Jackson's doing a great job. I'm really proud of how much he has come into himself this season as the season's going on. Real quick, before we go any further, guys, you don't need them necessarily this week at hottytoddytennis.com, but you better be ready because coming up in 2 weeks, or actually in 3 weeks, because we got a bye week in between, so you got plenty of time to prepare. Alabama is coming to Oxford for what could be the biggest game of the season outside of the Egg Bowl, guys, depending on how these next 2 games go. Head to hottytoddytennis.com now. Don't wait. You even want to start planning for that Egg Bowl, by the way, because those are going to go really fast. Those are going to be sold out weeks in advance. So go to hottytoddytennis.com, reserve your date, reserve your site. All you got to do is buy it, and then all you got to do is fold your chair up at the end. They'll take care of all the rest. They're going to send you your email. They're going to give you all your information. They are awesome. Check them out, hottytoddytennis.com. And then, of course, deadsox.com. I hope you guys all took advantage of the score sale. I know I did. I know Nick did. And great deals all last week leading up to kickoff, 52% off. I hope all you guys took advantage. But anytime you go to deadsox.com, use the code RebelWalk, you're always going to get 25% off site-wide on your entire order. Always. Doesn't matter what happens in the game. Ole Miss could win or lose. You're still going to get that 25% off at deadsox.com with the code RebelWalk. Take advantage of that. I hope you guys took advantage of the score sale. I cannot wait for my socks to get here. I know they're overloaded, so I know they're going to be they're trying to get them to me as quick as they can. I was a little late getting my order in, which I felt terrible about because then I missed the daggum Lane Train socks. But, that's what happens. I'll get them when they come back in stock. So hottytoddytennis.com, deadsoxy.com. All right, Nick, real quick, go over your final keys to the game that you haven't talked about yet, and then we'll make our predictions and wrap this show up. Going to be a little shorter show tonight. I've got some things to take care of. But, Nick, your final keys to the game that you haven't talked about yet. I know you got an article coming out, but go ahead and spill them out to us.
So also, same as last week, you got to get, and we've talked about it a lot this show, but we got to get to Jaden Daniels. We got to get pressure on him. And LSU's offensive line features 2 freshman tackles. So if we can get Cedric Johnson back, and Tavius Robinson and Jared Ivey have performed well this year, if we can have a constant rotation of those 3 and maybe a 4th guy, pounding those freshmen on the outside and getting that guy to cave in the pocket, he's not going to throw many interceptions, but if we can keep him from getting outside the pocket, extending plays, and rattle him early. And, he's been kind of up and down this year. I think last week was probably one of the better games he's ever had, but he hasn't had many, back-to-back, good games this year. He's kind of up and down. So hopefully he can play down this week and we can get after him. And I think that's probably the biggest key to the game is, just smothering Jaden Daniels.
Yeah, and to your point about when he gets out of the pocket, 3rd down last week was an abomination defensively for Ole Miss. They gave up, I lost count of the 3rd and double-digit plays they gave up to keep Auburn in the game. Ashford getting out, and then they leave a guy wide open downfield, or they let him scramble 15 yards. You got to be better. You cannot let them convert 3rd and 10-plus yard plays. So you got to be better at that. If he gets out of the pocket, spy him. Don't let the receivers get wide open. It's a balance that you got to find.
Easier said than done.
Easier said than done. I get that. And the whole, should it be a 3-man front? Should it be a 4-man front? That debate is still raging this year.
Yeah.
I let the coaches
see a little bit of both.
They know a whole lot more about football than I do. Right. I know Lane knows what he's doing with the personnel that we have. I know that's the best scheme to run, and it worked really well up until Auburn. That was the one bad game we've had. The sky's not falling just because Ole Miss has a bad defensive game. Concerning, yes. Into the world, no. You just got to straighten it up, fix those holes, and stop those holes up for a team like LSU. One comment we got here from Jay Wall on YouTube says she's interested to see the play calls on both sides this weekend, similar teams, and feels it will come down to last play. Well, we've been talking about that, how close it's going to be. Play calling was something I was a little concerned about inside the 10 last week offensively for Ole Miss. There were a few plays I was just like, what are we doing? Why are we running that play? The opening drive, Ole Miss tried 2 different quarterback sneaks. One of them was successful. The second one was a little longer, and they tried the same play, and Auburn was stacking the box. They were clearly ready for it, and they didn't audible out of it. You got to make decisions like that. You've got to see that if you're an offensive coordinator and understand what the defense is bringing to you. This is Charlie Weiss's first year at Ole Miss.
Yeah.
He's going to make mistakes too. I would like to see some improvement on especially red zone offensive play calling for Ole Miss to be a little bit more efficient and put teams away. Put the team away. When you get the lead, step on their throat. I don't care if it's 100-0. Embarrass them. Don't let them be back in the game. Yeah. Okay, maybe 100-0 is a little extreme. But get up by 4 or 5 touchdowns and then don't let off the gas. Just stay on it. Run the clock. Do what you got to do. Don't run bad plays that give the offense the ball back, and then your defense is tired out, and then all of a sudden other teams marching downfield and getting right back in the game. So hopefully we'll see a little bit of improvement there. But overall, a very impressive year for Ole Miss so far. Again, 7-0, 3-0 in the conference. Their first place in sole possession of first place in the SEC West. Alabama has Mississippi State at home this weekend. Poor Bulldogs. They get the tide again after they come off of a bad loss.
I think I heard it's the 3rd year in a row after, or maybe at least 2 years in a row after State has to play them after a loss. So,
and real quick, I was remiss and did not do this at the top of the show, and I meant to, but our sincere condolences are with the Mississippi State family tonight with the loss of a 19-year-old former Tupelo High School offensive lineman, just way too soon. I cannot imagine what that feels like for his family. Just to, there's no rivalry bigger than that. And Sam Westmoreland was a 19-year-old freshman kid who had his whole life seemingly ahead of him. Yep. And obviously we don't know the circumstances of what happened. We're not going to speculate on it. And that is private between him, his family, or between his family and the medical personnel and the football program. But certainly just a tragic loss of life, far too young. So our prayers are with the Mississippi State community, with Coach Leach and the whole team down there in Starkville. Regardless of the fact that they are a rival, that does not mean that you never want to see things like this happen. So
Absolutely.
Just heartbroken over that, man. 19-year-old kid who was a great player at Tupelo, and was going to be a great player at State, just far too young. So you heard it. It seems like it's happening more and more often with these young kids, very young athletes, coming to untimely ends. And hopefully we will start to see some improvement there, and the mental health awareness and things of that nature will hopefully be brought more to light, and things like this will be less or that won't happen as much, is what I should say.
Right.
So our condolences and prayers are with the Westmoreland and Mississippi State family. All right, Nick. Prediction time. I'm nervous about this one, man. I don't even know what to say. Last week we were both pretty off. I think I said 35-25 and you said 38-20, something like that.
Yeah.
And 48-24 was the final. So Ole Miss put up a few more points, which is good. They gave up a few more than I was hoping. But either way, they got the win. I didn't care if it was 72-0. And for the first few minutes, it looked like it was going to be 72-0.
Yeah.
What you got for LSU this weekend?
I'm thinking, like you said earlier, I don't think it's going to be a high-scoring game.
Yeah.
I'm going to go 27-23, Ole Miss.
27-23. All right. I am a little concerned defensively after what I saw last week. I don't want to. This guy's not falling, like I said, but it is a little bit concerning when you're about to go into a very hostile environment. So I expect LSU to score 30 plus, which means I'm going to have to hope Ole Miss scores a lot more. So I'm thinking that, and again, I hope I'm wrong here. I hope LSU gets shut out at home and gets embarrassed. I just don't see that happening. I'm going to go Ole Miss wins this one by a final of 42-38. I think it's going to be close. I think it's going to be down to the wire. We're all going to be having heart attacks. Ole Miss pulls it out at the end by 4. And knowing our luck, LSU will probably get the ball in the last possession and have a chance to win the game or something like that. But Ole Miss pulls it out 42-28, and I hope I'm way off on that one. For the most part, we've been pretty good with our predictions this year. I feel like
we've been in the
other than Georgia Tech, I think we both said they'd get points, and they didn't score yet. But for the most part, I think we've been pretty good on our predictions. The game the Kentucky game, we were both pretty close on.
I believe so.
And then Vanderbilt, we were almost spot on. We were both real close on that one. Last week, we weren't too far off. We were just a little bit off on how it would end up. Yeah. So 42-28, me. You've got, remind me yours.
27-23, Ole Miss.
27-23. Jay Wall, who commented earlier, she says 23-20. So she's kind of in your boat there. She thinks it's going to be a low-scoring game. You could be right. Which defense shows up for both teams? That's going to be the key in this one. That game will kick off at 2:30 on CBS. Ole Miss gets the CBS game, and then next week we finally get our first night game. Of course, it's in College Station. We'll go over all that next week, of course. But 2:30 p.m. this Saturday at LSU on CBS. If you can't be there in person, be sure and tune in, and we will have all the coverage for you at the Rebel Walk, as always. Until then, hotty toddy, go Rebels. He's Nick. I'm Austin. We'll talk to you next time. Have a great night, everybody.